Facebook.
Hey guys.
Hello. Welcome to the Tall and the Short of It today with
Betsy,
Jenny, and our special guest, our first special guest ever, Ms. Allison Fancher. Say hello.
Hey,
all
everybody.
right, yeah.
Sorry guys, I'm gonna have a hard time keeping my. That's all right.
That's okay.
You know who I am. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
I've got my Valentine's scarf on today.
You know you work in an elementary setting when you're
Mhm.
like decked out in pink and
Mhm.
purple and red and hearts and.
Yes, and children loaded me up with sugar all afternoon.
Me too.
And we loaded them up with sugar, or I did.
Yes.
And sent them home.
This is our gift to you parents. Every holiday, we load your children with sugar and send them home for the rest of the day.
Yes.
I actually had a parent tell me this morning that, and I hope she watches this would make her laugh, tell me this morning that one day she's going to load her children up with sugar before they come to school and let us handle it all day.
Well, I've never done that.
Half of our kids kind of eating Pop-Tarts and
That's
all
true.
that good stuff. Kool-Aid,
That's true.
yeah, it's fine.
I'm sure it'd be fine.
Yes. They can handle the extra.
All right, so once again, if you're watching us on replay, make sure you give us a hashtag replay below so we know you're watching. And feel free, if you jump on live, to comment and to interact with us as we talk today.
Yes, and guys, if you are coming on after, you're not on here chatting with us, you come on, still comment.
Yes, comment, ask questions.
Because we see I'm talking with this hand, you can't see it. We see the views. We see the views.
Yes,
we
we
know
do.
you guys are out there. We know you're watching.
We
Talk
want to know
to
who
us.
you are.
Yes, chat with us.
Absolutely. And give
So-
us ideas about other things that we can talk to you about, because we
Yes.
need more ideas. After this month, we don't have anything like...
Well, we can come up with
I
something.
mean, we can come up with something, but we don't have like a firm plan yet. So if you have ideas, please put those in there for us.
All
All right, we are continuing our month of February on All Things Preschool.
Yes.
Woo-hoo. And that is why we invited Allison to be here with us today, because our topic this week is speech and language impairments.
Right.
Yay. So we're going to ask Allison some questions, and she's going to be our expert panelist. And then we will provide additional commentary like Betsy and I always do. So, so Betsy, would you like to start?
All right, I was going to say, we usually have it planned out.
Yeah,
So
we
talk
didn't
about
plan
what
this.
we
We're just
did.
winging it.
Yeah, whatever. All right, I'm sorry, guys. Here's the basic. What's an SLP?
Okay, so if you hear the term SLP, what that stands for is speech language pathologist. You might also hear people say speech therapist, speech teacher, speech pathologist, speech path. All of that essentially just means that I'm a person who is trained in the diagnosis and treatment of disorders of communication. So it might be, language, might be speech, fluency, like stuttering. It could be social communication. And in certain settings, SLPs also work on things like swallowing and cognition.
Awesome.
So it's pretty broad.
Yeah, so SLP speech. Think SLP speech and language. Okay, so you have students on your caseload that have both speech impairments and language impairments. What do those mean exactly?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to differentiate that. Most of the time when people think speech, they think saying sounds. And, classically, that's kind of what speech pathologists did, and that's starting to evolve. So kids with speech impairments, we're looking at motor plans and how they articulate sounds. So we're looking at the movements that we use, both with voice and with the articulators, the lips, the tongue, the teeth, to make certain
I've never
speech
heard that
sounds.
word before. Articulators.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
In school, we usually call them the speech helpers.
Okay,
Right.
I've heard that.
Right.
I've heard that, but I
Yes.
like the articulators. Like I need to
Sounds
find
like a band.
I need to find a way.
Yes.
I need to find a way to use that in conversation sometime. This weekend,
know.
that's my goal.
I know.
That is my goal. I'm
Articulators.
going to use that in that's
I
my
love
goal.
it. I mean, seriously, that sounds like some band at some hippie restaurant. Like that's acoustic.
I have a friend
Hey,
who,
Jake.
Hey, Jake.
who is always trying to come up with band names, and that's
I
what
love
I need
it.
to suggest.
You'll have to
There
give
we
that
go.
to him. For
There we
sure.
go.
So what we're really talking about with articulation is our kids that aren't saying their letters correctly, like
Yeah.
substituting. Give me some examples of substituting.
Yeah. So a common one, if we're talking about preschool, a common one is if we say the sound K or C, which goes k, 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 they might substitute a T for that instead.
Yeah. That is pretty common in preschool.
Yep, and additionally the G then would become a D. That's a pretty typical one. They also do things like stopping, so a sound that has air coming through, like an F or an S or S, might become a T instead, because that's just easier to do as kids are developing those speech patterns.
So if they see a cat, they might say tat.
Oh, yes, they do.
Okay, yeah.
I was in speech for S's.
You were?
But I knocked my 2 front teeth out prior to kindergarten.
Oh, yeah, that would do that.
That's a whole different story.
Yeah.
Once you start messing with the dental status.
Yes.
But yeah, so articulation, we're looking at how you produce different sounds. And there are certain patterns, like not to get too detailed, but there's also kind of a subset of that called phonology, which is different processes. So we might have a kid that doesn't substitute just one particular sound for another, but maybe in almost all the words they say, they delete the ending sound. Or if we have a blend like star or stop, they delete part of that blend and it's tar or top. So that kind of goes in with that speech impairment label.
Cool. So what about language?
Language is complex, and we're talking about the use of our symbols, whether it's words, whether it's gestures, even picture communication and things like that to convey messages. So kids who have a language impairment generally demonstrate some difficulty either in the understanding of spoken language. So I'm not really sure what you're saying. I have trouble following directions. If I'm asked to point to something, I might struggle with that. I might not always respond to my name even, or things of that nature. That's more of that receptive communication or understanding of language. And then we also have the expressive. So I might have a child who, maybe we're preschool age, but we're using maybe just single words to communicate. We have that kiddo who, mom says, well, he just really doesn't talk.
Right.
So at the preschool level, language is typically, we're working on building vocabulary, building functional communication, both in the receptive understanding and also in that expressive or output.
Awesome. Yeah, I always think back to when I've worked with kids with language impairments in the past, and they sometimes will even mix up words that they think mean one thing and it means something else, and then you're like, what did you say? And they use a word that doesn't even fit, but it's what they think it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't teach preschool, but I have one in my class right now that says there's a lot of the words she wants to use in the sentence, but it's like they jumbled them all up. You don't know, and so it takes me a minute to be like, wait a second, okay, let me make a puzzle out of this. I know
Right.
I get the idea. I have to kind of rearrange them and sometimes there's a random word thrown in there.
Right. I'm sorry. And this one is not on our list of questions, but typically developing kids develop the language of grammar by the time they go to kindergarten, right? I mean,
generally
like
speaking,
in most kids.
Yeah, I mean,
like
most children.
Pronouns can sometimes be a little
Pronouns
sticky.
are tricky.
Maybe.
Yeah, you're right. But as
Why
far
I
as
said
syntax
sticky,
and,
thinking of like pronouns can be a little sticky. That's what I just
you know
said.
what? They are sticky.
Or tricky,
Yeah.
whichever. Yeah.
Either way.
And messy.
Either way.
Sure.
Yeah, I do see a lot of times kindergartners who are still struggling with that concept of pronouns, that him did this, her did that. But as a general rule, yes, a lot of that syntax, that sentence structure is pretty well developed by the time they reach
they
kindergarten.
develop it just through listening and through models. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Well, we've talked about the language piece, but there is language delay and a language impairment.
Sure.
So, kind of fill us in on the differences, or what that difference is.
Yeah, there's a lot that can be said about that. To simplify it, really, when we're looking at a language delay, a child is acquiring language skills later than a typically developing child would, but they're doing it in a predictable order. So like you would expect a child to do, only maybe we're 6 months behind track. And so I'm seeing this pattern of development, and things are coming along in a nice linear way, but it's just late. And that's what I would call a language delay.
Right.
And then when we're talking about a language disorder, usually what we start to see is kind of a scattering of skills. So I might acquire some of the skills I need in one age range, sometimes even more than I need, but I might be lacking some of the essential skills, and that gap is just not filling in over time.
Right.
And so that's what I would call more of a language disorder rather than
delay. And correct me if I'm wrong, language impairments affect a person through their lifetime.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not something that can be like corrected.
Mm-hmm.
Typically.
Yeah.
Delays we can work on, and they get to a point where they may not need language therapy anymore.
Yeah.
But an impairment is probably a lifelong issue and may even turn into a learning disability later, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and over time, a lot of children and adults learn the strategies that they need to compensate for those impairments.
Sure.
So maybe they will need therapy for many, many years. Maybe they won't, because they'll become great at, compensating for, and doing the things they need to do to help fill in those gaps. But yes. Yeah, you're going to see that pattern for a much longer duration of time.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time over here. No language.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
Are you
we're
feeling?
We're backwards, and so I could sit here like
keep
this, and
disappearing
so I'm
from the
like,
screen.
that's just distracting to me.
Yes.
So I'm sure it's distracting. So I'm like, but then we're backwards. Everything looks. Anyways, I'm sorry. We're keeping
all right.
it professional over here yet again.
ADHD.
No H.
No H.
No H.
Well, it's inattentive type. All right, so how does therapy look different in the preschool setting than it would in like a school age setting? Because I'm sure that there's differences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. Let's say this, that Allison is our preschool SLP, but she also then works with our kiddos from 3rd through 12th grade.
Right.
Or
Yes.
up to age 22 as needed. So she works in both settings.
Yes.
So,
This is why she's an expert on this
Yes.
question.
And let's say there are quite a few differences. Research suggests time and time again that children, and particularly young children, they learn best when they're presented with concepts and ideas at a developmental level that's appropriate to them and through play.
Play.
Play,
Yes.
play. So I'm an expert at getting on the floor and playing, blocks for the 20th time, or we get out the ball popper and we create a play routine around it, and we do those things over and over and over again. It's incredibly fun, and it's nothing like what you would expect. If you go to an outpatient therapy clinic or, in an elementary school setting where things are a lot more structured. Now, there's structure built in, but everything is based on play and trying to enrich vocabulary, trying to encourage imitation, and trying to maximize the kids' success by meeting them where they are with what they're interested in.
Right. So, fun.
Yeah.
Like I said, I love being in the preschool. It's my happy place.
Yeah.
and again, I don't teach preschool, but I have a kindergartner who the second our SLP walks in the door, whether she's here for therapy or not, boom, she's up. Me. It's my turn.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember when I was little, my friend had speech and I didn't have any speech errors.
I bet you were
and
jealous.
I was angry because my friend Cheryl got to go to speech and she always brought suckers or a toy back.
Oh.
And it was ridiculous. And I was like, I don't get why she gets all that and I don't get all that. I did not understand.
I did not get suckers or toys in speech.
Really?
Yeah.
Parents,
Maybe-
I do not give your kids suckers every time I meet with them for speech. Don't worry.
All I know is I had a little jelly problem with Cheryl. I'm just saying.
But we have a lot of fun, and they eat up that direct face-to-face attention. I try to work with my students either one-on-one or in a very small group, so we can work on turn-taking and social conversation and things like that. And that in itself is a reinforcer, even without the suckers or the toys. But that does happen sometimes too.
Yeah, I remember we used to have we had an SLP that I used to work with who she would give out, she had a whole tub of just these little Skittles, and kids would do amazing things for her for a single Skittle.
Mrs.
Like-
Fletcher.
Yeah, I say our
implements
preschool
that
teacher
technique.
uses they get a Skittle.
Yes. Okay.
So, all right. Well, so we've kind of talked about what the therapy looks like, and just the different types of impairments. But so if a parent, what should a parent be looking for? When should a parent be concerned? What should be catching their eye with their child? Especially, I mean, especially if it's like their first child, they
Right.
don't have any,
You
they
don't
may
have
not
any
have anything to
comparison.
compare, you know, but they can be like, oh, well, their sibling did this. What should a parent be looking for?
Yep.
Or what could they look for, I guess?
Sure. A lot of different markers, truly. And that's, I mean, it's a hard question to answer 100% because it's dependent on age and developmental level too. But some basics to look at. Number one, we were talking about speech impairments and language impairments. So when we're talking about speech, the big marker that we're looking at is intelligibility, or the child's ability to be understood. Every child, as they develop speech and language, has some articulation errors, and that is not necessarily cause for concern.
Right.
However, the biggest marker is, are we understanding the majority of what our child is saying? Are we not? Rule of thumb markers, and I mean, these are basic, but something to think about is your average 3-year-old, you should probably understand about 80 or more % of what they're saying to you. 4-year-olds, it's more like 90. By the time they start kindergarten, we look for a typically developing child to be near 100% intelligible. But at preschool level, there are going to be times when you don't understand them. If those
Right.
are few and far between, then you probably don't need to be concerned. But, you know, if you and others around you are struggling consistently to understand, you know, what your child's saying, maybe they have great language skills, but the sounds are in error a lot of the time and you're having trouble with that might be cause to look for a referral. As far as the language is concerned, there are a lot of markers to look at. One of them would be what we call like a mean length of utterance, like how many words they're putting together when we look at expressive language. And again, this is basic, but rule of thumb is if they're 3, we want them to be using 3-word utterances. I want candy. I love you. Get me that. You know, be able to put about 3 words together on average. 4-year-olds, again, it kind of goes with the age. When they're 2, it's about 2. 3, it's about 3. And that's not, you know, that's not exact, but that's kind of a rule of thumb to look at.
Right. So let's do a little clarifying there too then.
Sure.
So let's say we've got a kiddo who's got older brothers and sisters that want to do all the talking for them. And so they don't do a lot of talking.
Sure.
Is that something to be concerned about?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That I wouldn't call that a language impairment.
No.
By any means. If they're demonstrating the ability to use functional communication to get their wants and needs met, then we're probably in pretty good shape. When in doubt in that scenario, I mean, parents can do some things to try to test that a little bit, maybe some gentle withholding, or what as a therapist I might even call sabotage, which sounds scary, but really it's just, you know, make sure they don't have everything they need to do what they want, so they have to actually ask for it.
Use your words.
Yeah,
And not pointing. When they point, that's when you gesture. That's when you say, "Tell me, use your words." They really want it.
So no, that's not necessarily cause for concern. So,
Right.
you know, anytime that we get a referral and that's a concern, you know, we don't just strictly look at that mean length of utterance. We don't just strictly look at test scores. We're looking at, you know, an observation, parent report of, you know, what's going on. We look at social and developmental history to know a little bit about family dynamics.
Sure.
But that's just a basic rule of thumb to think about. And then also, you know, if we have a child who is not consistently responding to their name, following basic directions, both routine directions in the environment and also some of those more novel things like, you know, I don't know, it's very easy if every day you go to daycare and your shoes are by the door and you say get your shoes, well, that becomes a part of the routine after a while. But something novel and a little bit different, can they follow those directions too? And if they are not doing that consistently and you doubt that they're comprehending what you say, that might be another cause for, you know, looking at a referral.
Right. And also something I noticed when I was working in a daycare setting when I was in college, I had a lot of children in my 2 and 3-year-old class that if they did have some delays with their language, we would see a lot more behaviors because they got frustrated when they couldn't communicate. Does that happen?
110%.
Yeah.
Behavior
Biting.
is communication.
Biting, things like that.
That was our first live, I think,
Yes.
ever.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so true, right?
Yeah.
So if we're having trouble in social interactions, especially those kids who are in a daycare setting, preschool setting, or if they have siblings at home, if we're not using our words to communicate wants and needs, if we're biting, we're hitting, we're tantruming often, and that's a big concern, then, could it be strictly behavior? Yeah. But oftentimes that can be an indicator that we're struggling with language, and frustration is causing those behaviors.
For sure, for sure. So what are things that parents can do at home to support their child's speech and language development? Even if they're not impaired, just what are some great things parents can do to support speech and language development?
Well, what I don't think we need to say is I don't think that you need to do anything that takes a whole lot of time, energy, or thought process. So I'm really big on the concept that kids learn language through imitation. And it starts at a very basic level. So even if you do have a child who is impaired in their expressive language and use of words, can they imitate some of your gestures and some of the things that you do? So let's say I'm cleaning the countertops. Well, maybe I give my child a spray bottle with some water and a cloth, and they can imitate my movements. And during that routine, if they're imitating, I'm praising them and I'm talking through it with them. Now I spray, spray, spray. Let's wipe it off. Narrating what you're doing. So narrating play through the routines that they like is a big one, where you're modeling the words that they may not have yet.
Sure.
But even in those less exciting routines, when you've got a routine down, kids thrive on those routines. And if we can, put some appropriate language in those routines, model them regularly, over time, you should see some of that imitation. I love games that encourage imitation, whether it's, peekaboo, monkey see, monkey do, any kind of like rhymes. If your kid likes nursery rhymes, like the Itsy Bitsy Spider, where we're moving our hands and we're using gestures, that's a great way to encourage imitation. And over time, when I'm working with a little person who might be struggling with those words, over time, hopefully not only do they imitate my movements, but I could say, down came the rain and washed the spider.
And then they'll say,
and they can fill in the blanks and begin to do that. So those are some basic things to do. And I can't stress enough to just read with your child.
Yes.
Make it positive. If they love to be held, hold them, read with them, let them get a feel for that as being a really positive interaction, and that introduces them to so much wonderful, rich vocabulary just in a few minutes every day. Yes. So that's another thing.
Well, I was going to just, something that's always surprised me is like the kids I come in contact with, even when we taught middle school. I mean, here we are in the middle of farms everywhere, tractors everywhere. And I can remember out your window in middle school when the kids was like, oh, look, I don't remember what it was, but they like totally did not call it like, it wasn't, say it was a tractor. They did, I don't know what, like, look at the truck out there. And I just thought, and it's like things like, how many of those do you pass driving down the road?
Absolutely.
Like, here, talk about it. Talk about it as your, look
Driving
at that.
in the car is a great time to have language with your kids.
Yeah.
Play games. Fine, I see something red. And then the kids look for red things. And
And I just always, and I think that, not that I expect everybody to know what all the farm equipment is called, but I can just remember, like I said, a middle schooler, I just thought.
It's hard to believe that in Indiana you wouldn't know some of that.
At least the truck or tractor and a combine and a semi. Like, those are the three basics or whatever.
I know what those are.
And I just, like, with our younger kids, it's like.
Well, I remember us having kids enrolling at school where we do picture cards with them and they didn't know what bread was or a squirrel or, things like that. So, labeling things with your kids.
Absolutely.
From day one, or that's a big deal. The more background knowledge and vocabulary they have, we don't want them to be what's called word poor, right, when they enter school. So.
And I will say, too, when you talk about labeling things, a lot of parents, and I myself included, when we read a story or when we play or when we go somewhere, what we like is we like to go, what is that? And see the kids label those items. And while that is a skill that's really important, sometimes it's really difficult for our kids to do that, and that can cause some frustration. So if you do have a child who's struggling with some of that expressive language, I encourage you to model that language for them instead during meaningful activities. Oh, not instead of what is that? Look at that combine in the field. Do you see the grain coming out? That's a combine. Combines are big. You know, model that for them. And over time, I think you'll hear them out of them as well. But any typically developing kid, that's beneficial. If we have a child who is struggling with expressive language, then we know that they're going to need multiple, expressive and receptive, they're going to need multiple exposures to that vocabulary in order for it to really stick.
For sure. So
instead of just, once in a while, maybe we'll label that, if it's something that's important to you that you really want to see them acquire, try to expose them to it as much as possible, model it frequently, then give them the opportunity to try that labeling.
Absolutely.
Well, and that goes back to the books, I think, too, because your topics are endless when you look at it that way.
For sure. Well, this has been awesome. Yes. We are so excited that we had our first guest.
Thanks for having me.
So fun.
Yes. And guys, again, I'm talking with my hand that you can't see. It's over here.
Oh, you can't see mine either. I'm gonna help you.
Yeah. I was like, no, it's because it's backwards.
I'm lucky I'm in the middle today.
She must really love us because we don't have school tomorrow. This is after school.
I know.
This is our Friday. And she stayed with us. So
I know.
I was really excited. I feel honored to be the
Actually,
first
she
guest
even
ever.
drove over here to be with us. She wasn't in our building today.
I know. Crazy.
She loves us. However, you did get treats from your preschoolers.
Did.
Thanks, Elisa and Janelle.
Yes. Yay. So next week. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on what we're doing next week, Betsy. Oh, we're talking about developmental delays next week.
Yes. Yes,
developmental delays is next week.
Ah, sorry.
So
our very professional.
Oh,
I moved it. No, our very professional. You need to bring that back tomorrow or next week.
Yeah, I will bring it back. I think I'm crooked still. I'm looking at it straight and.
But okay, guys,
there it is.
You're in the with my pop socket. You are hanging
in a child chair.
My students' chairs.
Because I keep forgetting to bring my little clip-on thing that holds the
professionalism out of us. is.
We need some help, y'all.
It is ridiculous. We are the top of our game.
It's been fun to see the behind the scenes.
Yes, it is backstage. The green
riveting,
room, the green
isn't
room's
it?
huge.
It is riveting.
There are lots of snacks in the green. No, there's not.
I have juice. I have juice in the fridge.
Juice?
I have juice in the fridge.
I showed up and received chocolate.
That's true.
I have juice in the fridge. Any juice you would like. And there are homemade brownies.
Yes.
From scratch. Thank you.
So next week we will talk about developmental delays. We'll talk about Indiana's new take on developmental delay and how that can last past the age of 5 now, and what that means for public schools, and some implications that some of us didn't really understand were going to happen. But we'll definitely talk about that, and we'll talk about what things we do in preschool to help with developmental delays. So until next week, that is it for the tall and the short of it. See you next time. Say bye.
Bye, guys.